Well, welcome back to Python Scripting for GIS Applications. This is a class at the University of Alaska Fairbanks, and it's spring semester 2013. In this session, we're going to cover how to create streamlines, and the lines will be coded in terms of stream order from an elevation raster. So the streams are going to be actually channels of high flow accumulation. And in the homework assignment, you'll make a script tool where you'll basically have the user will input an elevation raster, and then there'll be some sort of threshold value for minimum flow accumulation, which defines what a channel is. And in your script tool, that will be a long integer that will have a range limit of minimum of 100 and a maximum of 5,000. And the default will be 1,000. And then there's two stream order methods. There's a Strahler method and the Shreve method. So then basically the user will pick which method to use, and then the user will specify the output line feature class. Okay, so we start our script by checking out the Spatial Analyst extension. And then we'll import from Arcpy Spatial Analyst all the geoprocessing tools. And then we'll set our workspace, and then we'll set some input from the user variables. So one would be the output line feature class, and then the input elevation raster, and then the stream order. So that would be a string, either Strahler or Shreve. So the next step will be to take our elevation raster and fill in any local imperfections or local pits in the elevation raster. So we'll create a new raster object, and I'll call it fill raster. So we use the fill tool, and then we're going to fill our elevation raster. So once we have our elevation raster, any local sinks have been filled, we're going to create another raster for every pixel. What's the flow direction? So that's a tool called flow direction. And we're going to use our fill raster, and then everything else is optional. So we're just going to say create for every pixel what's the dominant flow direction. And then once we have the flow direction raster, we can calculate for every pixel how many pixels flow into that pixel. So that would be a flow accumulation raster. So the tool is flow accumulation, and that requires a flow direction raster. And actually, let me use the raster object just to be a little different here. Okay, so in the script tool, the user will specify a threshold of flow accumulation that will be what we consider a channel. So I'll make a variable here called threshold, and we'll set that to, let's say, 2,000 pixels. So now we have this flow accumulation raster, and what we want to do is find all the pixels that have a flow accumulation of at least 2,000. If it has a flow accumulation less than or equal to 2,000, just make it no data. So we'll call this output channel raster object. So we could use the set null tool. So we're going to ask a question, and the question will be using our flow accumulation raster. And then if that question is false, we'll give the pixel value a 1. And then if the question is true, then it becomes no data. So then what is the question? So the question is the value less than threshold? So what we'll have to do is make a query before we use this. So we have my query, is the value less than 2,000? Actually, let me put a space there. So space to separate the operator. So now if we look at my query, we've got a space before the operator and a space after the operator. Okay, so then we run the set null tool. So the set null tool looks at this flow accumulation raster, and if the question is true, so if the value is less than 2,000, then it becomes no data. And if it's greater than 2000, the pixels assign a value of 1. So we could double check by looking at our channels raster and looking at a property dot minimum, and then look at the property dot maximum. So it does have 1 as the only value in that raster. Okay, so then we can use that raster and create stream order pixels. So the first order stream would be at the top of the basin, and then whenever 2 first order streams come together, they create a second order stream. And then going down the basin, wherever 2 second order streams come together, they become third order streams. Okay, so the inputs to the stream order tool will be our channel raster, and that's a temporary raster, and then our flow direction raster, that's also a temporary raster, and then a string variable I called stream order. So then we could make our streams raster using the stream order tool. So the input will be for stream order tool. What is the input channel raster? So that's this raster object. And then what is the flow direction raster? So that's this raster object. And then what is the method? So either striler or shrieve, and that's stored in this variable. So then that will create a raster where 1 represents a first order stream. So near the top of the basin, the first streams that occur. 2 would represent a second order stream. So where 2 first order streams come together, that creates a second order stream. And then our final step is to convert this to a polyline. So we could use the Arcpy.raster to polyline. So convert our temporary raster called stream raster to a permanent polyline. And that I stored in a feature class called outline feature class. Okay, so then we'll look at these lines in ArcMap. Okay, so we have our elevation raster and the lines that were created from that elevation raster. So if I turn off the elevation raster, so the first order streams are at the top of the basins, and then the first order streams come together at second order streams, and then wherever 2 second order streams come together, that's going to be a third order stream.